like to introduce our first speaker, my colleague and my boss, Michelle Casey, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York. Michelle, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Deborah, and thank you to our wonderful panel of speakers and all of you for joining us this evening. It's so good to connect with you all. I really look forward to this event each year, and I'm so grateful for your time and your continued support of our work and our essential mission. I come here tonight feeling uplifted, exhausted, encouraged, and most importantly, hopeful. It's hard to hold all of the things that have happened in the last couple of weeks in my head and my heart at the same time. Tonight, we are here to celebrate and also to realistically look at the challenges ahead for us. 2021 marks the 48th year since the Supreme Court Roe v. Wade was established the legal right to abortion, a decision that 73% of Americans support today. I'm not sure you would think that given some of the culture wars that that happen as we see discourse. But almost half a century really has passed since this case was decided, and we're still confronting the reality that a legal right to abortion is just not enough. Nearly 1 in 4 women will have an abortion in their lifetime. Yet, I don't have to tell you that abortion is a right in name only for far too many people across our country. Access largely depends on someone's income, race, or zip code. I want you to think about that. Access to abortion largely depends on someone's income, race, or zip code. Since 2011, more than 480 abortion restrictions have been enacted in states, making abortion inaccessible for many people with low incomes and Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are already forced to navigate a legacy of racist and discriminatory systems. The past 4 years have also been full of relentless attacks on reproductive health at the national level. Right now, there are 18 reproductive rights cases that are only one step away from the Supreme Court. And as you know, recent changes on the Supreme Court, we now have a 6-3 majority that is hostile to reproductive rights. While we can take some comfort in the fact that in recent Supreme Court decisions that they have not come close to overturning Roe v. Wade outright, it really has allowed many unreasonable restrictions to care in individual states. With the new makeup of the current court, there is a strong possibility that Roe could be overturned, or more likely in the short term, be further eroded. To be clear, if this were to happen, it would put more than 25 million women at risk of losing access to abortion, which is more than 1/3 of women of reproductive age in this country. Think about that, 1/3. There are many places where abortion is currently legal, technically, but not accessible. Whether it's related to distance away from a clinic, unnecessary waiting periods, lack of insurance or funding, or other requirements that have nothing to do with safety or medical necessity. I understand this is not encouraging news, and I don't feel like I'm bringing up the group here. So, but I would say that we are lucky to live in a state with leaders like Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, a state that in 2019 passed the Reproductive Health Act with one of the strongest protections for abortion access in any state in the country. The Reproductive Health Act codifies Roe v. Wade into state law. It ensures that at every point in a pregnancy, a patient's health, not a politician's ideology, drives medical decisions. Not everyone lives in a state like New York, and maybe they get more sun than we do. But you can be rest assured that at Planned Parenthood, we are working hard every single day to ensure our patients and people throughout the country have access to safe and legal abortions and have access to the full range of family planning and reproductive health services. We are also advocating for funding to support access to care and education, especially for people who face significant barriers to these, both in New York and nationally. We know that we are not currently meeting the full demands for these services, even in a state like New York. Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York is currently working on expanding access in both Western New York and the Finger Lakes with brick and mortar health center expansions in the near future and continued growth of our telehealth services across the affiliate. Planned Parenthood's mission is to build a world in which every person, regardless of their race, income, insurance, gender identity, sexual orientation, abilities, or immigration status, can access expert, compassionate, sexual and reproductive health care, information and education without shame or judgment. That was not a thing, I don't think, when I grew up. There seemed to be a lot of shame and judgment around everything to do with reproductive health. Providing the care we do is a challenge on a regular day, minus pandemics and other things. We face funding shortages, protesters, security concerns, taking care of our staff and the people we serve, navigating a really complex and ever-changing healthcare environment. There's just really so much to keep the work going on a daily basis. But 2020 really brought a new focus to the racial inequality that's pervasive in our society, which we see in our daily work. And the COVID-19 pandemic has taken so many lives and has shown a bright light on these inequities. On January 6th, we witnessed a violent attack on our Capitol and against our democracy. This attack was carried out by white supremacists, fueled by a racist agenda against communities of color. The racist ideologies driving this attack are also at the root of many attacks we experience against reproductive freedom. Just as our democracy prevailed, so shall we. At Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York, we've been working relentlessly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic to maintain and expand access to essential healthcare services for all that come through our doors. It was never a question of were we going to close at all. That just never was even a decision that slightly came to mind. For many of our folks, we're the only source of healthcare. And the unfortunate reality is that the pandemic has really amplified the barriers to care for many of the communities that we serve. All of the bricks and mortar sites that we have remained open to ensure access to each of the communities we serve. And currently we are operating at very close to our pre-pandemic clinic schedule in all areas. As I bet you can imagine, this has been a really scary time for both our patients and staff. People are wondering if it's okay to come out of their homes. Our employees are juggling all the stresses of the pandemic and are at work every day to provide essential health care to the people who need us. I've really never been prouder of our compassionate and dedicated employees. In addition to continuing to see patients in our healthcare centers as their needs require, we have also added site-to-home telehealth services. Our staff have also creatively collaborated to move all possible aspects of our programming to the virtual space. This includes our youth programming, our domestic violence and sexual assault services, and our education and public affairs teams have also held several successful events and are engaging supporters and activists in new ways. I think the pandemic will have forever made some changes in our business model and how we serve people going forward. Through the tireless work of staff, changes that would have taken months and years to implement under normal circumstances really were implemented in a number of days and weeks. And I'm sure you've probably experienced that in your own life and your own work. I really want to thank our staff, funders, and supporters for making all of this possible. We will remain focused on providing critical services no matter what. We continue to position ourselves to meet our vision of growing access to services to meet the needs of the people in our 18-county region. With the recent swearing in of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we really begin a new chapter, one step closer to full control of our bodies, our rights, and our future. Even as we celebrate this tremendous victory, we know that there's so much that must be done straight away, and it won't be without barriers. I just wanted to calm people a little and say, please don't worry if you saw the press conference on Inauguration Day. The press secretary was having a few little first day jitters and didn't handle a question about abortion very well. But let me assure you, the new administration is moving forward with promises made regarding their agenda and reproductive health. We actually spoke with them today and look to the 28th of January for some significant movement in that area. And speaking of Inauguration Day, I was really deeply touched by Amanda Gorman's poem at yesterday's ceremony, which we were talking about before we started a little bit. In part, she said, somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. Her words moved me so much, and I've really taken her inspirational words to heart. I believe really that this is a time for hope and a time for action. We have so much to do, and I look forward to doing it with you all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I want to pass it along to Sarah Timmerman from Rochester Now, who's our co-sponsor of the event, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was so great. And I would love to echo that that poem given was at the inauguration was truly extraordinary. And my emotions were amplified by the fact that I did get myself a champagne for one to celebrate when the inauguration did finally happen. And I will share one quote that I loved from it, which was that democracy can be paraphrase, democracy can be temporarily halted, but never stopped, basically what she said. And I think that goes as well with us, the women's movement, these types of rights, where even if we have setbacks like we've had, especially in the last 4 years and many times before that, we always keep moving and pick ourselves back up, and they can never permanently stop us from seeking our rights. As Michelle said, I'm the president of Rochester Now, the National Organization for Women. I'm so happy to be able to host this event again this year. It's been pretty crazy. So I was very glad to get an email from Deborah over at Planned Parenthood saying, do you want to do this again? Because of course, this is always one of our favorite events throughout the year. And at Now, we've been around since the 60s and fully dedicated to the liberation of women and the furthering of women's rights in all aspects of life, including major areas are always expanding abortion, reproductive healthcare rights, ending violence against women, immigration rights, all of those types of things. And what we know, and as Michelle said, when you put in access to these services, it really lifts up the health of the community, and you really see a decrease in things such as the maternal mortality rate, which is very high in this country, and just also so many other things, because the clinics are providing such all-around healthcare, and as human beings, we have a basic right to healthcare. We have a basic right to be able to seek these services in our area, as Planned Parenthood tries to do, free of shame, which is always good. We could always use less of that. And we just really want to keep going, keep pushing. You really can't stay still in this movement. Every time you want to say that we have a victory, because now does a lot of work in the legislative arena versus direct patient contact, which Planned Parenthood engages in. And you get a really big victory, and then you tumble back a little bit, and they do stuff like presenting an undue burden, as we know in the 90s they said, and does it meet an undue burden? And as we know, a lot of laws passed, in our opinion, meet an undue burden and unrealistic burden, and judges have not agreed with us on that. But we just really have to keep pushing forward and keep going, because the most basic right a human being has is to control what happens inside of their own body and to their body. Because as we know, things such as pregnancy, family planning, abortion, all of these services, this isn't just something that happens. It's can possibly be deadly for people, for a lot of people, and you need healthcare, you need services, because whether you're having children or choosing not to have children, pregnant people need services to facilitate all this access. And obviously we are very excited, and by the new administration coming in, changing the tide, and really transforming the legality around abortion, hoping to be able to change how we interact with other countries in terms of abortion, such as like international gag rule and those types of things, and getting rid of them and really helping people access their basic healthcare needs. I remember when I was in my undergrad a couple years ago, and I was doing my final big paper, and I was doing it on healthcare and women's healthcare access. And one of the guys in the class said to me, "Oh, well, you always write about abortion. That's like the only thing you talk about." And meanwhile, this particular guy, every class I had with him, he managed to write about the death penalty and why it shouldn't exist because of money, not morals reasons. So, but I was the one who was pigeonholing, because I dared to constantly bring up how it affected women, how it affects our healthcare and our lives. And I am proud to wear the badge of the person who keeps bringing us up and is that person who won't shut up about abortion, because someone has to, because there's not a lot of other people waiting in the ranks to be public on all these things. So we're very happy that all you are coming out tonight. On a fun note, my mom has been working from home since January on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays seem to be the crazy day. So I might need her to change what day she's home, because she might be causing all of this. So I guess we'll wait it out. And yeah, we're so excited that everyone's here, that everyone's come out for this, and all of the truly incredible speakers that we still have to come, including Congressman Joe Morelle. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us live. Something has come up last minute in the House. I guess they're a little busier over there than us here in Western New York. So we do have a video from him that I will be playing. So hold on one second. Okay. And please just do like a thumbs up for me that everything is good with the video.
Good evening. Thank you for having me with you today. I'm sorry that I'm here only virtually. I'm stuck in Washington, but it's great to be with you. And I'd like to start with some acknowledgements of some of my dear friends and partners who are expected to be with you tonight. I certainly hope they are. First, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of New York, my dear friend Kathy Hochul. She has been a leader in so many important issues. Reproductive rights and women's rights are certainly a part of many of the things that she's been involved in. She's a great friend, and she spent so much time in Rochester, and we're delighted for the amount of attention that she gives us in this part of the state. To Michelle Casey, my longtime friend, who's president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York. We've had an opportunity to work on so many important projects, and so grateful for your continued leadership, as well as the leadership of Sarah Timmerman, our chapter president of NOW. I remember being with you 2 years ago already over at the Unitarian Church on Winton Road to continue to have a program like this to talk about people in the community who care deeply about all the things that NOW fights for. Dr. Renee Mestad, General Obstetrics and Chief of Gynecology at Upstate University Hospital. I know this has been such an incredibly difficult year for healthcare providers. Appreciate so much your leadership and your good work. My good friend, Jen Lunsford, who has recently taken her oath and is a new member of the New York State Assembly. I'm a little bit jealous, Jen, because my heart is in many ways always going to be partly in Albany. And speaking of Albany, somebody I met many years ago, who's just a great friend and a great leader, Robin Chappelle Golston, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood for the Empire State. 48 years ago, tomorrow, we celebrate the decision of Roe versus Wade in the United States Supreme Court, which acknowledged what many Americans already believed, that women have a fundamental and constitutional right to make their own reproductive health care decisions. Sadly, we are still in the same fight all these years later, and the pandemic threatens to erode the progress we've made. Just this month, the same Supreme Court, with different people, in my view, made a horrendous decision when they ruled that women seeking access to abortion medications cannot take advantage of telehealth options, that they must meet with their doctor or healthcare provider in a clinic or hospital or office setting. And throughout the past year, we've stressed social distancing and advocated the use of telehealth, something I'm a big champion of. But when it comes to women choosing how to handle their own pregnancy, we ask themselves to put themselves and their hospital staff in danger. How incongruent with all the things that we're doing. And this decision also underscores the threats we face with this court. Now more than ever, we must commit to a reinvigorated fight for women to protect their right to choose. The pandemic has also shown us how much work we have to do to protect women within their own homes. We've all been spending more time at home, but home isn't always a safe place. Willow Domestic Violence Center recently reported that calls to its domestic violence hotline are up 50% since the pandemic began. 2 years ago, in one of the first press conferences I held as a member of Congress, I highlighted the dire need to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which expired just a week after I took office. Part of keeping women safe in their own home is ensuring the organizations on the front lines of these crises are funded and that they have the tools to keep women safe, which reauthorizing VAWA would do. And VAWA needs to be updated to all the things that we now know about violence, control of women. So those updates are obviously top priorities for us in the House. But yesterday was the dawn of a new age. And I personally feel today almost a physical, certainly an emotional relief from the stress of the past 4 years. Yesterday was an exceptional day. Perfect in almost every single way. Joe Biden in the White House and the historic, emotional oath-taking of Vice President Kamala Harris. With those two, I believe we can finally accomplish some of our goals. Because not only are they committed to protecting women, and Joe Biden, remember, helped author the original Violence Against Women Act back in the 1990s, but with President Biden and Vice President Harris and a Democratic Senate, we have a great opportunity before us to give women in this country the protections they so deserve. We need to protect Roe versus Wade, reauthorize VAWA, close the gender pay gap, uplift women-owned businesses, and so much more. And I know President Biden and Vice President Harris have just only taken their oaths of office, but I can tell you my colleagues in the House and I are anxious to get to work and improve the lives of everyone blessed to call America home. So thanks again for inviting me to be here. Rights and women's rights are certainly a much more. And I know President Biden and Vice work and improve the lives of everyone blessed to call America home. So thanks again for inviting me to be here tonight. But more importantly, thank you for all the incredible things you do for our community, for our state, and for our country.
Wonderful video from the Congressman. Sorry about the slight technical difficulties at the very end. And sorry, I've lost who my script of who I'm handing it.
That's all right. You are fine. And that was just absolutely fabulous. And I thank Congressman Joe Morelle for sending us his message and greetings digitally in advance, even though he couldn't be here with us on Zoom tonight. So many thanks to Congressman Joe Morelle, who's been very supportive of Planned Parenthood, Rochester Now, and so many other women's organizations in our community. Now I would like to introduce another great supporter, cheerleader for reproductive health rights, women's rights, and healthcare, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, and I believe she has arrived.
Yes, I have arrived.
Yes,
Wow.
thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. So glad to have
Hello,
you.
my friends. I literally just got off the plane from New York City. I'm going to tell you, the only thing I like about this pandemic is there's no longer waits on the tarmac. When it's supposed to leave at 6, it leaves at 6. Supposed to leave at 5, it leaves at 5. So that's the only good thing about it. And I'm going to miss getting through the airport with ease when this is all over. But that'll be a sign of normalcy when it takes a little bit longer. But great to see my friends. And I know Joe acknowledged all of you were on the call, but Deborah and McDell Hernandez and Michelle Casey. I don't want to forget my friend Sarah Timmerman. I know Joe was just on. I see Robin's on as well. Hey, Robin, how are you? And first of all, Joe Morelle is extraordinary. You know, I did have a chance to work closely with him when I was in Congress, and he was an assembly person and leader of the Democratic Party in Monroe County. So we've been close a long time, but it is so reassuring to have him having our backs, because he understands the needs of now. He understands Planned Parenthood. He understands the needs of women. And so he's going to continue to be a great voice for us in Washington. So, glad I could at least follow him. I know he's very busy these days, but yeah. And I had a chance to reflect on the plane, and I was thinking about an article I had written back around October 20th this year, and giving the reasons why women should vote of any year that women should vote. I said, the scariest thing about 2020, 3 words: Amy Coney Barrett. Those are the 3 most scary words that came out of 2020, in my opinion, because as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg was there, you're always a little anxious, but you just felt like they'd keep it together. The majority would keep it together. And to have someone who has dedicated her life to assaulting rights that all of us have fought for, but our mothers fought for and our grandmothers fought for. She has no regard for the values that we have, such as reproductive freedom. And so having her in that position of power and seeing her on the platform yesterday was just kind of a cold splash of water in the face to otherwise a spectacular day. And so, Joe described it beautifully of, what yesterday meant for our nation. And I guarantee that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, our fabulous vice president, will do everything in their power to protect women's rights. And having majority leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, is a great development. So we don't have to worry about all the crazy things getting passed and getting through anymore. When I was in Congress, it was Republican Congress. Nancy Pelosi was the minority leader. They passed 45 times. They tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act and the contraception mandate. But at the time, it would get over to the Senate and they would say no because it's run by the Democrats. So there's always a check and balance. So now the only thing we're really afraid of is the Supreme Court. I mean, I feel good about the White House. I feel good about the Senate. I feel good about Congress. But it's the Supreme Court that is that scary specter lurking out there that our rights could be overturned, rights that we've enjoyed in this country for 48 solid years. So that's why our voices have to continue to be heard. And I so appreciate Planned Parenthood, but also now and all the women's organizations teaming up to not just talk about this one issue, because the whole scope of a woman is more than just her choice to have an abortion or not. It's beyond that. It's about healthcare. And I'm really worried about women not getting healthcare during the pandemic. They're not going in for screenings to these facilities. This is the main form of healthcare for millions of women in this country, going to a clinic run by Planned Parenthood because people trust it. And Planned Parenthood is in places like healthcare deserts and places where women of color are not getting the service that they need. So this is really the oasis in this desert, is a Planned Parenthood facility. And to know that during the pandemic, people are just anxious about even going there to get a screening, that really makes us anxious about breast cancer this year and cervical cancer and a lot of other screenings that aren't going on because of this anxiety. So that on top of, and I heard the Congressman mention this, right now, women are really captives in their own homes. If you're in an abusive home and you have to be there because your employer says work remotely, or you never had a job that you could leave the house for in the first place, and now your kids are home and your husband's unemployed or that your domestic partner is unemployed, this could be an explosive situation. So at the state of New York, we're taking more steps to ensure that there's more consequences for abusers, and that's part of the governor's platform this year with our State of the State address he just gave. If you read it, you have a chance to read it. It's very thick, but there's a lot of details. Also making abusers pay for the cost of someone relocating their home. I mean, one of the reasons my family, my mother and I and my aunt set up a transitional home for victims of domestic violence, we knew people always say, well, why would someone stay with someone who's so abusive? Where do you think they're going to go? I mean, the choice is stay with an abuser with your kids, so they have a roof over their heads, or are you going to go out on the streets? So we created a home for them. And so I understand the desperation that people feel when they feel trapped in their own homes because they live with an abuser, especially with this pandemic. And now we have to, we're trying to make sure that we have more resources going for domestic violence programs and changing laws to benefit the women. And so that's what we're focused on. But today we celebrate Roe v. Wade because the alternative is almost too scary to think of, and how many state legislatures are out there that are just, anxiously waiting for it to be overturned by the Supreme Court so they can be let loose in their own states. Now, I don't worry about New York. And I was proud 2 years ago this month, within the first 30 days of when we took control of the Democratic Senate, and I had the gavel in my hand, Robin shaking her head. She was there. Everybody's so excited. What a day that was to be able to pass the Reproductive Health Act that simply codifies Roe v. Wade. And with the Republicans in charge for all those years, they wouldn't even allow us to have that basic right to say that it's codified in New York state law. So thank God 2 years ago, that era went away. This session, we have a lot more young women elected to the Senate and more people of color. So I think we have the more representative government right now than we ever have in our state's history, which I find very exciting when I preside over the Senate. So again, I feel good about the rights of women in New York, but I also am an American citizen. And I'm very concerned about the other states out there where they don't have the enlightened leadership or the advocates like all of you who will march in the state capitol and not take no for an answer. So I do miss our gatherings when we fill up the convention center, thousands of people. We're all wearing the great pink. I'm not sure why I wasn't wearing pink today. I should have worn some pink. I didn't have time to change. Just got back. But it energizes us in Albany too. When you all show up, or I go out to an event in New York City or in Buffalo or Syracuse or Rochester, and I show up and you're all there, dressed up with the signs. I mean, it's just, you create this sense of activity and activism that I think is so important. Something we inherited and something that I know we're passing on to the next generation, because these fights will never end. There always will be people against us. And that's why we have to celebrate the good days like yesterday, but also know just right across the street from that beautiful Capitol is the Supreme Court. And that's what keeps me up at night. So I know you know that, but let's have a nice toast. I have had enough drinks yesterday to celebrate the inauguration. So I think I won't have a toast tonight, but it is great to see everybody. And I could never thank you enough for just being out there in the communities. Your voices are heard. You're taking care of women who need your services. You are angels on earth here. And I thank every one of you for caring so much about the women in your community to do exactly what you do every day. So I'm signing off because I got to unpack and get ready for the next trip. But it was great to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. And we were so glad that Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul wanted to be a part of this event. And I'm so glad to hear that all of our energy and enthusiasm is felt by her and that she loves us being there, because we love showing up. If there's anything now women and Planned Parenthood supporters do, it's showing up and showing out. So our next speaker is Dr. Renee Mistad, General Obstetrics and Gynecology Chief at Upstate University Hospital in Syracuse. Dr. Mistad is interested in family planning to include improving contraceptive use through education enhanced access. She also trains new obstetrician gynecologists in safe abortion care in the first and second trimester, which is very important to actually have that training done, because in some hospitals, they don't even train that. They won't train new medical professions on that, which is truly a shame and not good practice at all. So thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm actually really thrilled to see everybody. So what can I say? So protecting abortion in the time of COVID, I have to say probably one of the not horrible things about COVID and the pandemic and how hideously it was managed by the prior administration is that it made Donald Trump's incompetence blatantly obvious. I mean, a lot of us knew how bad it was, but he was going to win again based on the economy. And COVID came and it just blew all that up for him. And so, you know, for good or for bad, the pandemic made it possible for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to win and move us forward. And it also made it very, very obvious to a lot of fence sitters that the Republican way was not the way to go in this particular time. I think my father voted Democratically for the first time in my life, and that includes my non-voting life, the first 18 years of my life. When I was a teenager and when I, you know, cast my first vote for president, which was for Clinton, his first time around, I was a one issue voter. I always voted for whoever was going to keep abortion legal. And my father said, you can't be a one issue voter. You have to look at all the things, and abortion will always be fine. It'll be fine. Which is, you can say when you're upper white middle class, even in the middle of America. I grew up in Kansas. But you could say that because, yeah, I'd always have access. He was a physician and we could travel if we had to. We had plenty of money and he had connections. So yeah, it would have been fine. But you know, he always voted for the economics. My view was I was always going to pay too much in taxes, regardless of who was president, because I would always make too much to not, you know, to have to not be able to pay taxes, and I'd make too little to have any loopholes. So taxes weren't what my concern was. So I was always a one issue voter. I was actually very, very surprised at how under fire contraception came in the past couple of years. I always knew abortion was tenuous, but I thought enough women in America have been using contraception, you know, legally for long enough. I mean, my mom is in her 70s and she was one of the early pill users. So it surprised me how easily it was attacked over the past couple of years. So to not be a downer, New York State, and Lieutenant Governor Hochul brought up the Reproductive Health Act. It did more than just codify Roe v. Wade for the state of New York. It actually made it possible for healthcare providers who provide abortions to not get thrown in jail if they had a bad abortion, a bad outcome. So I deliver babies, I do hysterectomies, I do everything in OBGYN, the basic stuff. I don't do cancer surgery, that kind of thing. So if I screw up a hysterectomy, just sue me. You know, if I have a bad delivery, I get sued. If I screw up an abortion, you can throw me in jail before the Reproductive Health Act. So, and additionally, what it did was it made it legal for New York providers to provide care to women from out of state. And before that, you know, New York providers did provide women who traveled in from out of state, but it technically wasn't legal. So now we can do that. And we're signing up for NAF and some of the other sites so that women from out of state can find us and to start working on getting the pipeline. So I provide at SUNY Upstate Medical University. I have 5 residents per year, so we have 20 residents total. And I train my second-year residents in providing abortions, both first and second trimester. There are a variety of limitations from my hospital. But I will say that with COVID happening this year, my hospital administration has been fully supportive in us continuing to provide abortions. New York State has been fully supportive in being able to continue to provide abortions. Women's Health was was labeled as essential healthcare services. So women could continue to, they could continue to be seen in person as well as on telemedicine, which really upset a lot of my orthopedic and plastic surgery colleagues because they couldn't bring patients into the office. But vaginal infections, abnormal bleeding, all of this could continue to have services. The New York State protected that. We did, however, we are performing significantly more medication abortions. And I also drive up to Watertown twice a month and provide surgical abortions up in Watertown. And I am not doing nearly as many now because most of them are getting medication abortions. One, because I can only get up there twice a month, but women don't want to come into the office and they want to minimize as much time as they spend in the office. So they're doing a lot of telemedicine up there. But I have had to restrict the number of women that are referred to us because they're afraid to have an abortion, a surgical abortion in the office without significant medication. Right now, most of the women only receive oral medications. They can't get anything in their IV if they're off-site. And so women with various anxieties and concerns about pain could come to us and we would take care of them in the operating room with an anesthesiologist. But because surgical services across the board at our hospital, and I'm sure at many other hospitals around New York State, have been severely restricted. All elective surgeries basically were stopped with the exception of abortions. But given that they were pulling operating room nurses to cover the COVID floors and the regular floors, because people still had heart attacks, this past year, we just didn't have enough nurses to be able to cover the operating rooms. And so we never knew day to day if the next day's cases were going to be canceled. And so in an effort to not promise a woman a service and delay her even longer and then have her be canceled the morning of her surgery, we just had to send the various affiliates and the places who refer patients to us for anesthesia and whatnot. They had to be taken care of at their own local site. However, women with health complications, diabetes, high blood pressure, pulmonary emboli, any other variety of things, we could continue to take care of them. So unfortunately, that's what COVID has done for women. And there has been some early data that's indicated that women have limited how often they want to go to the hospital, the healthcare providers for prenatal care, for even postpartum care. So it definitely has put a significant damper and a lot of fear for women. Again, New York State has done a wonderful job of making it possible for us to pursue telemedicine. I know the federal government and Medicaid instituted it initially, but New York is really, really picking up on it. And that is one of the initiatives in this upcoming year is to continue to support telemedicine services. We have found it's been great for women, even outside of COVID. I have patients who have to miss appointments because their tire blew out in their car and they only have one car for their whole family. Or they woke up and their child was sick and they couldn't bring their kid was throwing up. So 3/4 of our appointments we can do just like this. And so these women don't have to miss their appointments. We can still take care of them. We can just order the tests that might be needed and they can do it at their leisure. It's great for women who can't leave their job for 3 or 4 hours because, as most of you know, going to see any kind of a healthcare provider nowadays is not a 30-minute in and out. It's a long time. And now they can basically go to their car if they have to and with their phone and have their appointment with us and basically just miss 30 minutes of work, which is entirely doable for a lot of women now. So we're finding that it's really expanded healthcare for a lot of women and a lot of people in general. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue this, particularly with funding and parity in so that doctors will want to continue to do it as well. I don't know what else to say. It's been a very challenging year. It's been a very, very interesting year. It's been exciting to see how people are able to get very creative and thinking outside the box. And I think it's given a chance for very creative people to shine and coming up with new and exciting ways of taking care of our patients across the board. So thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking. It's always great, and we always try to have a medical professional's take on what's happening right now, and you're very much at the front lines of all of it, so you really know what's happening, and I really appreciate your insight on this, and yeah, just really great work. Next, we are going to have speak one of my friends and one of the newest assembly members, Jennifer Lunsford. She represents the 135th district, which I personally live in, which is kind of the east side of the suburbs of Rochester. So, all right, here we go.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be speaking to you as the newest assembly member in our local Rochester delegation. The other two new assembly people got a jump on me because they were filling up some vacant seats, so they got to swear in before. One of the difficulties at these events of speaking last is everyone already touched on so many of the things I wanted to discuss. But one thing I do not tire of is hearing the phrase President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Anybody just wants to just keep saying that with me like a mantra. Well, of course, I would have loved to have, taken the Senate by several seats. I will deal with the fact that Kamala Harris is going to sit there as the tiebreaker on vote after vote after vote. I am proud to have her serving us, and I know there was some discussion before we started recording about how emotional it was to watch that yesterday. I did it while waiting for session to start because for some reason the assembly session also started at noon yesterday. So we were all like, what are you doing? We're all watching the same thing. So it was very challenging, but we got through because as usual, it started late, so we were fine. But one of the things I wanted to start with was how grateful I am to all of you for all of the hard work that you've done, not just in the realm of reproductive justice, which helped pass the Reproductive Health Act in 2019, but also I've been marching alongside of you. Today, my Facebook memory was the Women's March from 2017, where I brought my 8-week-old son down to Washington Square Park, and I met some of you for the first time. And I hadn't thought about running for office. And I just knew that we had to do something. And, someone said yesterday that, none of this was inevitable. This was work. This was advocacy. This was a fight. And all of you today stood together arm in arm and made this happen. So I want to express to you how grateful I am that I get to enter into a New York State legislature that already passed the Reproductive Health Act, with a federal government that is going to make it easier for us to do our job, that is not going to stand in our way, that we're not going to be constantly fighting to fill the gap on Title X funding because we're not going to have a White House that's hostile to the kind of good work Planned Parenthood does, that understands the essential medical services that Planned Parenthood provides to not just New York women, but to all women, to all people. Right now, 1 in 3 New Yorkers relies on Medicaid. 1 in 3. There's a 2016 stat that says that, I'm going to look at my notes here. It's a little late in the day. I don't usually rely on the notes, but This is my like 45th Zoom of today.
Okay.
1.2 million low-income New Yorkers rely on publicly funded sexual health care. With the increase in Medicaid-reliant New Yorkers since the pandemic, that number has grown. But we're not seeing the federal funding to come along with that to help deliver those services. The Reproductive Health Act has taken a lot of the, I think, stress off of New Yorkers to know that no matter what happens at the Supreme Court, New York is protected. But that's also just a law, and laws can be overturned. And while that's going to be difficult in New York because it's going to be real hard to overcome a Democratic majority, the New York State Senate was Republicanly held for 76 years until 2 years ago. So this is always a fight. This is always going to be something we have to advocate for. We can't go to sleep. And I know we want to. I'm tired too. I've been running nonstop for 4 years with a toddler. It's killing me. But we have to keep advocating and let everyone know that we're watching, and we're not going to let anything slip by us. What the Reproductive Health Act has also done is allowed us to focus on some of the more systemic challenges we have here in New York State to the delivery of high quality healthcare. And I do think that one of the positive side effects of COVID has been the realization that telemedicine is a real tool. Before, it wasn't something that we relied upon, but there are a lot of low-income women in rural areas and in urban areas that really struggle with getting to the doctor. So by making telemedicine more readily available, as Dr. Mastad, I hope I'm saying your name right, said, creating parity in payment to make sure that doctors are being paid for telemedicine the same way that they're paid for in-office visits so that they continue, even after the pandemic, to provide those services. That's essential to creating true access for women in New York State. There are a lot of infrastructure issues that go around that. I was glad to hear the governor highlighting telemedicine and broadband access together in the state, because what good is telemedicine if you don't have internet access? The way we count broadband access is basically, does somebody in your county have access to broadband? Okay, then everyone in your county has access to broadband. And that's why you see stats like 98% of New York has broadband access. No, it doesn't. We need to start counting that in a more realistic way that actually demonstrates what true broadband access looks like in places like the city of Rochester. I have meetings with people 20 minutes down the road from me who they're accessing, very poor cell phone data as their only form of internet access. And that's limiting them not just from accessing telemedicine, but doing work, getting schoolwork done, dealing with the kinds of appointments and things we have to do online now because we can't go to the DMV. We can't go to the Department of Labor. So we need to make sure that our state is supporting all of these services. Moving into this year, I'm personally focusing a lot on comprehensive sex education. Because one of the things we need to do to ensure that we have as many healthy, active, strong people in this state is to empower them with the information they need to take care of themselves. I have been a longtime advocate of changing the branding on sex ed. People really object to the idea that I'm going to teach my 4-year-old sex ed. I've been calling it body awareness, because when I teach my 4-year-old son that he has private parts that are for him, and that if someone touches him in an area where he shouldn't be touched, he needs to tell an adult, that's sex ed. Mm-hmm. When I tell him that boys and girls are different, from time to time, my son sees me getting dressed and he has a number of questions. That's sex ed. He wants to know where my peep is all the time. He doesn't seem to be understanding. It's a surprise every time for him. Mm-hmm. But we need to figure out ways to market that to people who for some reason think that sex ed means you teach kindergarteners how to use a condom, because that's not what's happening. Age-appropriate comprehensive sex ed is one tool in a large toolbox to help keep New Yorkers healthy. Another focus we have this year at the state level is on maternal mortality. You know, people don't think of New York State as a state that has a problem when it comes to healthcare, but we're ranked 30th out of 50 states in the area of maternal mortality. And that number, of course, is 4 to 5 times higher for women of color. In New York City, it is 12 times higher. I mean, that's an enormous disparity. And when you're talking about outcomes for women based on the color of their skin or the zip code they live in, or whether or not they graduated from high school, that's not something that happens in a first world country. We need to do better. We need to provide for people, again, who have trouble accessing healthcare. And one of the ways we can do that is by expanding the time frame under which women can access Medicaid coverage for postnatal care. Right now, that limitation is 60 days, but you can have, I miss crowds. I wish I could hear I see clapping. I don't feel clapping. Like, I miss feeling clapping. I do better in a crowd. You know, women suffer maternal disability and maternal mortality issues up to a year postnatal. And we need to have a healthcare system that recognizes that and treats that. And right now we're failing. And we need to do better for everybody. I'm excited to be part of this huge new coalition in Rochester, where we went from having one member in the majority of either house to having 5 in one election. Hey. That's huge. That's crazy. Harry Bronson was the dean of a delegation of 1. And now he gets to have meetings with people, and there are people to help him. And we're all really excited to do that. And we're excited to partner with you to meet the demands that the Reproductive Health Act has created, because we're no longer fighting the biggest fires anymore. Now we can fight with a scalpel instead of a machete. And I'm excited to do that with you. So thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to serve you. And let's get to work.
Indeed, yes. Unmute. Sorry about that. Unmute myself. Thank you again so much, Assembly Member Jen Lunsford. Looking forward to more opportunities to work with you, because we've worked with you in the past before you were elected. So you've always been very supportive. Thank you. Right now, I'd like to welcome one of our colleagues. Robin Chappelle Golston is the President and CEO of Planned Parenthood Empire State Acts. So we work closely with Robin and her team in Albany for state guidance. So welcome, Robin. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I feel like everyone's kind of done my talking for me and brought up all the good issues that I was going to be discussing tonight. So I'll just go over that. And I know am really the last person, but I'm very excited about the Assemblywoman. She's talking about our full agenda. So we're like all on the same page, which is amazing. And we have so many exciting new diverse members. We're really looking forward to working with so many of them, especially in Central Western. You all just kick butt. So we'll definitely be talking to you more about that, but just wanted to give you a quick rundown. And a lot of these issues have already been discussed, but in terms of kind of where we go from here as a state, especially legislatively and from a policy perspective, how do we keep moving forward with the success of the Reproductive Health Act? And so we just want to make sure that, you know, the fight is still there on the national level and everyone is very aware of the challenges in the Supreme Court, but there's still a lot of work we can do in New York State as well. So this year we kind of put our legislative agenda into 3 buckets: reproductive health, reproductive rights, and justice. So I'm just going to go over a few of those issues, and I really want to give also ample time for folks to ask questions, because we really want it to be a dialogue, and I know people have been talking to you a lot tonight, and so really want to have some feedback from you, but just want to kind of go through some of our major issues. And it does broaden because we're doing a lot of coalition work, but just kind of highlighting some of our main points and what we're really focusing on in this legislative session. So in regards to reproductive health, Of course, number one, and I think the Assemblywoman brought it up as well in terms of making sure that we're fully funded for reproductive health and sexual health care through the family planning grant. Because the state was forced to pull out of the Title X program because of the egregious new rules that the Trump administration put into place, the state actually had to backfill that money so we could remain whole. Now, mind you, we've not seen an increase in many years, so we're pretty much already performing on a deficit, and we know that providing these services don't get cheaper, they get more expensive. So we're already at a loss, but our top priority is to make sure that we are fully funded and that we remain whole, even in these hard economic times. As you know, the state is very challenged with their budget and really counting on federal funding to kind of get them through facing severe deficits. But we're very optimistic, and we did see the budget language, which actually just came out the other night, that our funding is in there. And so that is definitely going to be our top fight as we go into this session and start talking to legislators more and more. Also, as people have really mentioned several people have mentioned throughout this conversation, is telehealth. Central Western, as well as our other affiliates, had to really ramp up quickly due to the pandemic. And so we want to make sure that what was put in place for emergency reasons to get people up to speed and be able to provide that care, that they stay intact and also are put into statute. And also the pay parity piece is huge. So we want to make sure that, it still costs money to provide those services. So we want to make sure that we're covered for that and we can continue to provide those services. And also once we kind of get past these initial hurdles and get back to some sense of normalcy, also use telehealth to really reach those folks that are hard to reach. And we still have always had challenges reaching. Also insurance coverage of abortion care. We already have that in regulation, but we want to get that in statute. And also, as people have mentioned earlier, maternal mortality and morbidity continues to be a huge issue that we're very tapped into and want to do whatever we can to make sure that we really lower that, we become lower on that level of the maternal mortality and morbidity list of states, because it really is egregious. It's not acceptable that based on your race that you get less access or poor access to care, and no one should lose their life if they choose to have a child. So those are some of the things in the reproductive health bucket that we're going to be focusing on this legislative session. Around reproductive rights, of course, as many have mentioned, comprehensive sex ed. We're very excited about this. It's been a priority for our last couple of years, but really we're ramping up. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, we had this, nice rollout of nice videos, and really going to do some real grassroots reaching out to really educate people around the importance of it from so many different aspects. And of course, we're talking about medically accurate, age appropriate, which is the key. And as the Assemblywoman said, it really is age appropriate. And is talking about, when we talk about K through 12 sex education, we're talking about kids in kindergarten learning about germs and washing their hands. But then also as people grow in relationships, kids need to know how to deal with relationships, friendships, their sexuality. These are all things that we should be able to give them the tools and be comfortable having them have the information they need to make the best decision for themselves. So we're very excited about this issue, and we understand that the educational system continues to have challenges as we're trying to deal with educating our kids virtually, but this is something that we're going to continue to push and work behind the scenes to make sure this becomes a reality. As some of you might have heard also, the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, is something that's been floating around. There's a few different versions right now, and even one that has appeared in the budget that the governor has rolled out recently. So that will come together, but definitely something that we think makes sense. And this would be a constitutional amendment, which would definitely be a multi-year process. But we are looking forward to working with folks, and it does need to get done. Unfortunately, it was never able to get done on the national level. There's still potential there, but there's still a lot of work to do, and we shouldn't take that for granted. Also creating an abortion fund, abortion access fund. So this would allow taxpayers to voluntarily contribute to a abortion fund on their state income tax returns. There's a lot of different opportunities to give to charities. I don't know if people even notice that, because some people aren't even aware that they're able to do that in terms of donating a portion of their tax return to a good cause. But we really wanted to push that, not only just because, we don't anticipate that it raises a lot of money, but it really is about destigmatizing abortion. And just, this is abortion care, this is health care, and this is something that if you feel strongly about, you should be able to contribute. And we know the challenges that other states are facing, that we know folks are coming into our state to get care. And so we want to make sure that we're really elevating that issue and that there's still challenges even though we're in good shape in New York State. And also we have a study bill to look into limited service pregnancy centers, which is a sophisticated, complicated way to say CPCs, which are crisis pregnancy centers. We have over 100 across the state that are still providing inadequate care. They act as sometimes as Planned Parenthoods and really use deceptive practices to lure patients in, trying to make them and basically intimidate them not to have abortions and not really providing the services they need or the prenatal care that they need. And so this is an issue that has been a challenge across the country and has actually come up against some legal barriers. But we really want to see where we're at as a state and how we can kind of rein them in a way that makes sense, because they really are problematic and actually very hostile and move into move next door to several of our health centers and really are really doing a disservice to possibly our patients or someone else, and really just using deceptive practices to really have one goal of not having them have an abortion. And then our last bucket is justice. We are supporting budget justice, which you might have heard of and is becoming more and more commonplace in terms of really, since especially because the state is facing a fiscal challenge, really looking at ways to raise funds like the millionaire's tax and other ways to tax and really build revenue from the upper class to really be able to, even in better times, be able to fully access and be able to really fund the programs that people care about. And so this is something that's getting a lot of momentum. It's coming together. There's a coalition that's coming in place. And so we're going to be working with them because it is something that people feel very passionate about. And just some of the other issues that we're definitely have been consistently supporting in coalition is ending solitary confinement, voting protections and reforms. There's a lot of work we still need to do as a state to make sure that everyone has access to voting and making it easy and accessible to everyone. I think we've gone a long way and we've already passed a lot of really good bills because of the pandemic in terms of making it much easier for people to vote, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And then also medical aid in dying is another issue that's actually been recently added to our agenda. So we're really excited about this session, and as we move forward, we hope to work with all of you. You all are our loudest voices and our strongest voices. And as we do a virtual lobby day coming up and work with the affiliates and all their supporters, we really wanted to let you know that we still need you. We had a lot of successes with the Reproductive Health Act, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And so we're really looking forward to being a good partner on issues that might not traditionally be what is seen as Planned Parenthood issues, but also really ensuring that people have access to abortion and all reproductive health care and sexual health. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Deborah. Are you going to wrap it up?
Yep. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you for sharing that information with us. And I'll also let folks know if they want to read about these legislative priorities in greater detail, visit Planned Parenthood Empire State Act's website, and you can see the list of all of those priorities. So thank you for sharing that with us today, Robin. Now I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Sarah Connor, our Community Affairs Assistant, and Sarah's going to help us wrap it up with our question and answer or commentary, the part of the program as we near the end of this evening. Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so we're going to move on to Q&A. We're just going to ask folks to please type out your questions and put them into the chat so we can kind of keep things nice and orderly. And if you could, please indicate who your question is for, or if it's for the whole group of speakers to choose, but that'll help us as well. So feel free to start typing. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We're going to try to cut off right at 8 to respect everyone's time tonight. Give everyone time to type. Okay, we'll start with Barbara Moore's question. Barb said, for anyone, any of our speakers, I think who we have left on the call for our speakers are Michelle, Sarah, Dr. Mested, Assemblymember Lunsford, and Robin. We don't have Joe Morelle live with us, and Kathy Hochul had to hop off. Barb asked, for anyone who wants to answer, how do we energize our members that the work is not done? Many people think now that Biden and Harris are elected, we're done. Is there any one issue that will light a fire, so to speak?
I can take that. And then I'm going to hop off because I told my family I'd be done at 7:15.
Oh, wow. Yeah, sounds
I've been
good.
truthful with them. There's ramifications for me. The Supreme Court, just every day, they just keep pointing at the Supreme Court because it's terrifying, the reality of what's happening there. You know, people question why so many mainstream Republicans and people who were not true believers backed Donald Trump. And the answer is the courts and tax cuts, and they got what they bargained for. They made a devil's bargain to accept a full-blown criminal in the White House for 4 years so that they could get tax cuts for the wealthy and a conservative Supreme Court. And here we are. And they, I don't think, care about anything else. So we have to fight back against this very youthful, very conservative Supreme Court at every level. You know, there's lots of good work to be done at the state level. It is a little wonky. It is a little specific, but you can continue to motivate people. Look at mifepristone. I mean, this is a commonly used medication that people now have to risk their health to go get because the Trump administration decided to change a regulation and the Supreme Court said that's cool. Continuing to poke at that and show people how your work is never done. So earlier, someone was talking about contraception. Are we still talking about contraception? It's 2021. It's every time I turn around, I'm like, why is this still a thing? I've rewatched The West Wing. You could, there's no difference. It's the exact same arguments. The show's 20 years old. We never stop. It's always the time is a flat circle. So keep pointing to the Supreme Court, keep getting people out at the rallies. And I hope that we can all use a snooze. We can all take a breath, give people, you know, a month, but then get back to work because we're not done. But thank you guys so much. I'm going to hop off and go eat my now cold burrito. I'll get in the morning.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
I'm gonna back that up. I am amazed weekly. I talk to nurses and even other doctors who have no idea what's going on in the world of abortion legislation at all. And you know, and now that we have 6 justices who are opposed to abortion, basically, whenever I talk about, I basically say if when Roe falls, that's how I refer to it. And basically I've kind of accepted that Roe's probably going to fall in the next year or two. So I've just said that, and people look surprised. And so I think the big thing is we can't assume that everybody knows what we know. I mean, like I said, it boggles my mind. Healthcare professionals who don't know this. And granted, it's because I read all the headlines around this, but we just have to keep saying it. I mean, we can't make every single cocktail party about this because then no one's going to want to listen to you. But there's nothing wrong with dropping a line here and there at semi-appropriate times and saying, "Oh yeah, Roe's on its way out." You can thank this, you know, the 6-3 balance there.
Right, and I think that you know, I would add that the Supreme Court is the wrong place for this, right? Is that if we really want a permanent solution to it, there needs to be a legislative solution. Obviously, it would be even better if there could be a constitutional amendment. But that really is where that has to go in order to, you know, work out. I know I've been having a lot of conversations with my son about how many votes you need for this or that. And, honestly, there's 51 votes in the Senate, and that's not enough to get it done. It's not enough to pass a lot of things. And so unless they change the rules, they're going to need 60 votes to accomplish a lot of things nationally. And there's a lot of things that need to be done. There's really almost zero access in several states to abortion care, almost zero, if not zero. And there's 20 states that have a law that will automatically trigger to make abortions illegal if Roe v. Wade is overturned automatically. So it's, we're really in dire shape.
But I would say we could point to the 2018 and the current election of look what happens when everybody participates, and it's where my best friend in Georgia actually got in her BMW and drove people to the polls, because she knew that her white Southern in her BMW is not going to get pulled over. And, but when everybody participates, we can get stuff done. And, that's one of the big reasons why lots of people never voted and never paid attention to anything, because what's my vote make? What difference does it make? It makes an enormous difference. And so, and we got to see what happened when people who weren't old and white male participated en masse. And, and we need to pay attention to people who are under 30, because they're a huge movement. I mean, ever since Parkland, it's been blatantly obvious that, and I apologize, but kids are able to get shit done. So we need to not denigrate that. And, our responsibility is the older people. I'm 48 years old, so I'm actually not as young as I used to be. Our responsibility is we may not have as much fire and as we did, but we have enough experience that we can direct the energy, give it a place to go to be useful. And so that's what we need to do. I mean, the last two elections have just blown my mind in that what we can do when we actually bother to do it. And so if you've got friends and family who are like, no, you can do this, it can be done. So do it.
Absolutely. Let's see, okay, let's go to Dick Gilbert had a question. He said, not a problem for New York, but is there any movement on repealing the Helms Amendment at the federal level? And Dick, I wonder if you're talking about the Hyde Amendment, using public funding for abortion care. Maybe we don't have Jen or Joe, but maybe Robin would want to address that.
Sure. So the Hyde Amendment is definitely a top priority nationally for reproductive rights organizations to reverse, because it really is a disservice, especially to poor income pregnant people. And so we really want to make sure that that is a priority for our president. And we've had a lot of conversations, and we did formally endorse President Biden. And so this was one of the prerequisites in terms of an agreement that he would do this work. It does have to go through the legislature, so it does get complicated based on kind of the split in the Senate. But we know that this is something that can be done, should be done, and the Biden administration has agreed to it. So it's just a question of doing that negotiating and doing the work on the ground to really get this done. And I think there is potential.
Well, I think in the past, the Democratic Party has always just kind of passed it because it appeased the Republican Party. And I think a lot of us are very hopeful that the Republicans have demonstrated that they don't give a flying fig about what the Democratic Party wants or needs. And I'm kind of hopeful that this will be one of those places where the Democratic Party is like, no, we don't like this, so we're not going to vote to approve it this year. Because it has to be done every single year, I think, like every single administration or something. But it comes up every year. And that was one of the things Hillary Clinton had run on, was that she was not going to renew the Hyde Amendment. So, and in case anyone wants to know, it was made exactly in response to Roe v. Wade to prevent poor women from being able to get abortions. I mean, that was what Hyde said when he proposed it. So if anyone asks, tell them it's not your taxpayer dollar paying for abortion. It was a direct intent to prevent poor women from getting abortions.
It is 8:01 now. I just checked the time. So I don't want to go too far over so folks can get back to their evenings. I am planning to send a follow-up email to everybody who RSVP'd to tonight's event with a link to watch the recording of tonight's program. So everyone can keep an eye out for that and share with anyone who wanted to come but couldn't tonight. Just looking at the chat. So keep an eye on your emails for that. And I'll hand it off to Sarah, to close us up for the night.
Thank you, Sarah. If you have a room of people under 30, you're going to have more than one Sarah.
That's
doing
right.
it. So that's something to keep in mind. I want to once again thank all the speakers that were involved tonight. The insight you have provided to us is so valuable. As we say, we always want to make sure that we are using correct terminology, that we're updating our language, that we're using actual facts and science. So that's why we bring in these speakers, so that we can all be correct when we're telling people, because the worst thing that can happen is you're yelling for your side and it's completely untrue because you're just not up on everything. So we really want to thank everyone, and make sure to follow Planned Parenthood Central Western New York on all the social medias, as well as Rochester Now. I'm sure all of us, because we follow each other, it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the whole deal. And just on a personal note, it really makes me emotional to be a part of these types of events, because it keeps you going to see so many other people are also interested in this and also want to keep it going. And yes, just echoing what everyone's saying, breathing a sigh of relief today after yesterday. As a gay Jewish woman who is in the public eye talking about this stuff, it feels good that the people in charge aren't dehumanizing me, and I'm not waiting for the next shoe to fall every single day. What are they coming for next? And to everyone in the LGBT community, we always try our best to be as inclusive with our language as possible. And I will just say, if any of us slipped up, we're sorry, and we'll do better next time. And that's why we appreciate people bringing this stuff to our attention. So thank you so much to everyone who came out. Hopefully we will see you again. And hopefully this year we will be able to meet in person at some point, probably in the fall, winter, but that's what we are really hoping for. And thank you everyone for coming out.